Yes, Avengers Doomsday is doomed to fail. Yes, the MCU has self-sabotaged to a point of no return, and no, Fantastic Four First Steps will not be a comeback for the franchise, especially after what we know about it, there's no way. I'll forever be a die-hard fan of the MCU's Infinity Saga, which in my estimation is the single most coherent and perfectly intertwined web of stories ever told in entertainment history. Every single movie starting all the way back from Iron Man 2008 to the very end, which was Spider-Man Far From Home, it was quite simply brilliant. And why was that? What was it about those 23 films that made it feel so coherent and satisfying? Because if those 23 films were all just good or even great movies but had no unifying agents on screen or in the writing section, they would have never become the box office juggernauts that the whole saga eventually turned out to be. They used the classic hook and bait business formula where they created 3 solid IPs with a relatively moderate budget, relatively being the key word, and no, Hulk doesn't count. So they made Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor into household names, and with those 3 pillars firmly established, they built what became the biggest box office attraction in cinematic history. At the time these movies were made, the studio was barely surviving, and hence the cast wasn't what one would consider quote-unquote cream of the crop. The studio clearly couldn't afford a Tom Cruise or a Leonardo DiCaprio for the role of Tony Stark, so they settled for a mighty talented but extremely risky individual named Robert Downey Jr., and the rest, as they say, is history. Fast forward to today, almost 17 years later, the ship is sinking, and really fast might I add, and it seems like it'll be the biggest bit of irony in Hollywood history when RDJ stars in what might be the last movie, aka the last ditch effort, in the MCU in the form of Avengers Secret Wars. But how did we get here? How did the franchise go from Invincible to Invisible in just 6 short years? That's a serious fall from grace if I ever saw one. But here are the reasons, and trust me when I tell you, there's more than one. Remember when Tony Stark holds up an unfinished plastic replica of Cap's shield in Iron Man 2? What about Thanos turning sideways to give us that menacing grin at the end of Avengers? Or the random yet ever so subtle name drop of Doctor Strange and Winter Soldier?
Bruce Banner, Stephen Strange, anyone who's a threat.
Every single event, no matter how big or small, led to something real at the end. A monumental payoff for what seemed like inconsequential Easter eggs or teases, which then all culminated into an event of a lifetime in the form of Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Now the bar had been set so incredibly high, we as fans thought this ride will go on forever and that we'll never see a decline. But 12 movies and 15 television programs later, we're yet to come across said overarching storyline. Ask yourself what's connecting all the aforementioned parts into a whole. What makes them worth watching again, and I don't mean in terms of recall value, but as key parts of a larger story? The answer? Nothing. It was supposed to be Kang before, now it's Doom, but maybe Kang's coming back as well. Who knows? What also seems to be lacking is fan excitement, because we don't know what the point even is, and honestly many of us don't even care about now, because these 12 movies teased far too many things that never did and probably never will be of any consequence. And even if they did, the interest has already died down, so too little and too late. Kang being the biggest one of them all. Okay, maybe Jonathan Majors' arrest and subsequent firing put a dent in their plans, but they had a perfectly good, or rather legendary Denzel Washington right there to take up the mantle and make it unforgettable. And since it's a multiverse where everything is possible, this could have very well been explained, and if anything, Denzel would absolutely have killed as Kang. And now for some of the smaller but yet equally irritating things, like what happened to Moon Knight, or the Eternals after their little abysmal outing. Even something as massive as the celestial Tiamat was only addressed like 3.5 years later in Brave New World, which itself was a cheap knockoff of Winter Soldier. And Charlize Theron is clear appearing in Doctor Strange 2, which then led nowhere. And remember, Wanda died in the same movie, or did she? But no one cares anymore because it led nowhere and changed nothing. The New Vision went looking for answers, which then led to nowhere, and although they did announce a series called Vision Quest in 2026, but it's been about 4 years now and it'll be 5 by the time it releases, if ever. So once again, no one cares. And Monica Rambeau went to another universe where she she met the X-Men, didn't she? That went somewhere, didn't it? And Shang-Chi was recruited by the sorceress, right? Yeah, no one cares anymore. And the list goes on and on and on. Every time I sift through YouTube or Instagram, I see lesser and lesser comments asking about the aforementioned characters and story arcs. It's like the interest is fading away by the minute, because everything that happens leads to a big, annoying nothing. If there isn't any sort of a payoff for years, why even tease it in the first place? Okay, forget a payoff, there hasn't even been so much as an appearance by most of the aforementioned characters in like years. Like, where are veteran superheroes like Doctor Strange and Thor? And for lesser known and newer characters like Moon Knight and Vision, do they really think that they are big enough for people to wait for them for this long to grace us with their presence? I don't think so. I honestly feel it isn't even the same Kevin Feige that produced the Infinity Saga, but a woke, talentless hack from a parallel universe. What a fall from grace. Thor has been officially turned into a joke after Love and Thunder. He was already half a goofball after Ragnarok, but his character arc was more or less redeemed in Endgame. But Love and Thunder was a nail in the proverbial coffin. And Doctor Strange, I personally feel his entire character was ruined in No Way Home. Bear with me now before you go off on me, because I love that movie as much as the next guy, but Doctor Strange screwing up so monumentally by deploying a mighty dangerous spell that later went out of control and almost caused a tear in the multiverse. Also that a kid he barely knows can get into college.
Strange is meant to be the best of us.
Are you sure? What a big blow to a long-standing character who could also have been a potential leader of new Avengers. And don't even get me started on Hulk and Nick Fury. The character arcs they went on in She-Hulk and Secret Invasion was laughable at best. And Hawkeye is more or less officially retired, so at least he got a decent closure. That's fucked up. And no one cared about Brie Larson's Captain Marvel as it was anyway, and they still made it worse by releasing an absolute shit show like the Marvels, and a perfectly good mid-tier character like Ant-Man was turned into a sidekick in his own movie by his own girl boss daughter, who couldn't give a flying f that her dad saved half the universe. It's like they've brought the franchise and long-standing characters to a point where no one could give a fuck if their life depended on it. Great work, Marvel, you guys are absolutely killing it. And I mean it quite literally. So let's do a head count. Since the Infinity Saga ended, these are the heroes that have showed up to the party. Shang-Chi, Yelena Belova and friends as the new Avengers. Then there's the Eternals, and not 2 or 3 but 10 of them. Sure, it's enough. Kate Bishop as the new Hawkeye, Maya Lopez as Echo, who I don't think anyone even remembers. Then there's Riri Williams as Ironheart, which is just Temu Iron Man at this point. Well, I'm glad she's getting a show. That'll be a big hit, won't it? There's also Moon Knight, who up and disappeared after that one season, never to be heard from again. Kamala Khan's Miss Marvel, the queen of irritation and self-victimization herself, Jennifer Walters as She-Hulk. Cassie Lang is the potential new Ant-Man or woman or whatever her pronouns are. Potentially the entire X-Men. There's also Deadpool and Wolverine, who had full-blown outings in the MCU. The whole Skrull populace, Sentry. And now the Fantastic Four are about to show up. How many is that exactly? About 15 new projects that introduce nearly 36 plus superheroes. But who among them are genuinely intriguing characters? Shang-Chi, Moon Knight, a little bit, not a lot. Sentry is definitely intriguing thanks to the brilliant and nuanced portrayal by Lois Pullman. The X-Men, Deadpool, and Fantastic Four. Maybe not. I'm not so sure anymore. That's it. No, really, that's it. Among the 30 plus potentially teased featured characters, only 10 or so are still relevant and worth any fan interest. And the sad thing is that 3 among the 5 are actually Fox IPs that then fell into Marvel's lap after the merger, so they're not exactly originals in that sense. But the biggest problem is that none of them have any real part in the overall storyline, because the overall storyline doesn't exist. A crying shame, but why did it come to this point? Which neatly brings me to the next problem. DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion, which means every single character has to be gender swapped or else it'll be a cardinal sin. Even if it's at the expense of a good story, which I firmly believe is always the backbone of any good project. It's almost funny when you think about it, but more than half among the original 6 Avengers have in fact been gender swapped. Tony Stark's Iron Man is now Riri Williams' Ironheart, who looks more like a Power Ranger to be honest, and Hulk is now a family man. Wait, didn't he say he couldn't to Natasha?
I can't have this. Kids.
My god, that green bastard. He really did her dirty, didn't he? But his obvious female upgrade has graced us with her presence, the universally acclaimed Jennifer Walters as She-Hulk. And Kate Bishop is most likely gonna take up the mantle of Hawkeye, as Jeremy Renner is pretty old and probably too expensive to cast at this point, and the only 2 remaining members, Thor and Captain America, were also unfortunately gender swapped at one point or another. Don't forget that Jane Foster was Mighty Thor in Love and Thunder, and Peggy Carter played Captain America and Doctor Strange too. So it's girl boss time. Which means nobody gives a f***. Don't believe me? Well, Ironheart was stuck in developmental hell for years before they finally gave the green signal to the project, probably because they just wanted to push that shit out to be rid of it, and they're doing everything in their part to make sure it gets the best PR in the hopes that at least someone watches it. And on the other hand, there is no doubt in anyone's mind that She-Hulk is one of the worst outings in the MCU. And it's also infamous for being the most preachy and irritating of the lot, with the lead actress receiving universal dislike, and rightfully so. It also suffered major viewership loss and is terribly rated for that matter, along with being ridiculously expensive to make. And although Hawkeye was fine in its own right, let's be honest, nobody's holding their breath for Kate Bishop's arrival on the big screen, and after mega projects like Sinners, I really doubt Hailee Steinfeld will be coming back for some second-rate Marvel show. So it's 3 out of 3 now. And coming to Love and Thunder, it was just horrible. The audience ratings and the box office collections made that pretty clear, and I'm glad that the character of Jane Foster is finally done. And Peggy, being the arrogant Captain America, she showed up for like 2 minutes before being killed off by Wanda and Doctor Strange too, so it was inconsequential as it can get. And about Captain Carter and Marvel's What If, it's a question better left unanswered. And that just proves that all the girl bossing in the world could never make a project any kind of a commercial success, and the many-lettered crowd is always going to be a keyboard class, loudmouthed minority that has no cash to pay for tickets, and even if they did, they clearly aren't doing it. And after all these major and continued mistakes, Marvel bringing back Robert Downey Jr., potentially Chris Evans, an insanely large cast that will most likely make Marvel go bankrupt very soon, and the Russo brothers, who look like they're past their prime, well, after Electric State, I don't know what else to say. And all of this in a desperate attempt to renew fan interest is just a plain, simple, bad idea, because it's nigh impossible to fix nearly 30 projects worth of mistakes in 1 or even 2 films. And the last I heard, they're planning to split the final Avengers movie into 2 parts, which means we can get up for more and more and more nostalgia baiting and uncalled for cameos, which might ensure a week worth of good collection at the box office for the film before fan interest returns to nil, and we finally accept the reality that the old Marvel is now gone. And all that people like RDJ and Chris Evans can do is make a bank at the cost of their legacy to be a part of this new soulless era. The hair-like thin silver lining though is that the memories that the Infinity Saga gave us can never be taken away. That's it for today, people. I'm gonna go have an ice cream sundae.